Welcome to Learning Photography with Duck. Here's your host, Duck.
All right, welcome everybody to another edition of Learning Photography with Duck. I am Duck, and tonight's class is all about the new changes in Photoshop that Adobe has recently released. Last week, we went over all the changes that Adobe did to Lightroom, which were pretty extensive. It's one of the bigger updates that Adobe has released in a while. They tend to trickle little things out over the months, but this time around it was a pretty big package, a significant upgrade where it's very noticeable. So in tonight's session, we're going to be going over the things that Adobe did with Photoshop. Before we do that, I want to say a personal thank you to my Patreons, Carol, Bill, Jill, Bonnie, Brian, BJ, who's not here tonight, Pam, and Pam and Jill are my latest Patreons. So thank you very much for supporting my endeavors here as an educator to help you learn the ins and outs of photography, not only with the editing, but also with the camera and studio work, which we discuss, which will be next Monday's discussion. So just to give you a clue of my schedule, the first Monday is Lightroom, the second Monday is Photoshop, and the third Monday is general Q&A, and we can discuss anything, whether it's lighting or exposure or how to use a tripod, whatever it is that's bothering you, that's hanging you up. Post your questions, and we'll try to problem solve it for you. Okay? So just a couple of little things. Coming up is with Robert. He and I got together and we're going to be doing a field trip to historical Norwich. In conjunction with the Harford County Amateurs Photographers, we're doing a architectural walkabout, which is on Saturday, July 25th. We're going to meet up in Norwich at 10 o'clock in the morning. And we have a couple of locations, already pre-planned for us to hit. We're going to photograph a lot of the older buildings in the north part of town, come through a really, really old cemetery. So if you're into, headstone rubbings, this is a great opportunity. Hopefully we can get some good rubbings there if anybody's into it. But it's basically just a photographic walkabout. And then after that, we're going to head down a little bit further south. We're going to have lunch, and we're going to photograph some of the big manor houses that are there from the turn of the century. And the key feature is going to be St. Patrick's Cathedral, which is right there. Beautiful, beautiful edifice. And actually, let me share this. So if you go on the Harford County Amateurs Photographers group, in the events page, you can get all the information for the event there. The cathedral is the photograph I took when Bob and I went down scouting it, and that's the image you're going to be seeing in the advertisement. I'm putting this together as a two-part series or two-part session. The first part, obviously, is the walkabout on Saturday, where we actually actively go out and photograph all these locations. And then that following Monday, I'm going to be holding a very special online session for the people that attended that event, where I go over how to edit a lot of these images, and you're going to see my workflow going from from Lightroom to Photoshop and back to Lightroom, and hopefully it'll give you an alternative method of looking at your images. Or if you're unfamiliar with how to edit architectural images, maybe you'll pick up some tips and tricks, or at least a foundation to get you started in your own editing. So there's still plenty of time. We are going to be observing social distancing, and masks are required. Because this is an outdoor event, we're able to really spread out and keep our distance from each other. But still,
Hey, Doc,
yes.
I have a question about this. I have a problem with buildings where they come out slanted. Are you going to be teaching how to
Absolutely.
get it straight?
Yep.
Great, thanks.
No problem. Yeah, we're going to be going all the basics of how to properly photograph buildings, especially because what Bill just mentioned, that keystoning effect is a common problem. That's actually fixed in post, but I'll be going over the technique to make sure you get a proper image in the field that will allow you to properly edit it afterwards. So there's a couple little tricks there. But anyhow, hopefully you can join us. Hopefully it won't be rained out. We haven't picked a rain date, so keeping our fingers crossed. All right, so that's for the architectural walkabout. Okay. The second one I want to mention is this coming Wednesday at 7 o'clock. Our very own Bill Delane is going to be giving a presentation, tips on event photography, specifically how to take proper group shots. Bill, do you want to say anything about that?
Yes, this is for beginners and intermediates. I think of this as taking pictures of people at events, at your family functions, at group functions, a little bit of photojournalism, how to tell a story. And it's basically, I'm going to be talking about what works for me, and this will be an open discussion. You can talk about what works for you, what you prefer to do that I don't do or somebody else does. And this is a discussion. And just one thing, do you see the man and the boy in the right-hand corner there? In the picture,
Yep,
on
right here.
top? Okay, that. I've been wanting to use this line for a long time. That is my cousin Vinny.
Oh, that's awesome. I just watched that movie the other day. So
That is funny.
great movie. So hopefully those of you who aren't doing anything on Wednesday night will pop in and show your support. I'm hoping to be there, barring anything happening on my end. So, all right. So that's that. And Alan Kenzier. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Alan Kenzier.
That's the best I've heard in a long time.
Okay, how close was I?
Real close. Yeah, Kenzer.
Kenzer. Oh,
Yep.
Okay. The I there threw me off. Alan's gonna be getting together with Robert about putting together a program on bird photography. And if you look at his background, you can see some birds. I take it those are your images. That's your image back there. Awesome.
Yep.
And the date is to be determined. So, if you are not a member of the Harford County Amateur Photographers Group on Facebook, go ahead and sign up. Robert does an awesome job on keeping a very active group there. And one of the latest things is that people are giving their kind of like their backstory of how they got into photography. I'm working on mine, Rob. Don't worry, I'll be
I
posting it.
expect it soon. And by the way, I just checked the weather for July 25th. Morning clouds and warm, high of around 90.
Okay, clouds is good. All right, so good. All right. And let's see, anything else? What do we got? I think that's it for news. All right. So let's get into let's get into all the updates for Photoshop or for Photoshop. I think one of the biggest updates is with Adobe Camera Raw. Now, just to give a little bit of a backstory, from what I understand, that's happening internally with Adobe, is that they are working on getting their product to be able to work cross-platform across varying devices. Now, those of you who are old enough to have seen the progress of the cell phone going from this Star Trek communicator looking device to this literally a portable computer, know that these mobile devices are getting more and more powerful as far as computing. And Adobe early on saw this potential and has been planning well ahead of everybody else to be in a position to have their product to be able to do editing off of smartphones and tablets. So for that reason, they've been really streamlining their program. You may have noticed that their interface has changed considerably over the past several years. They've gone from an OS GUI system or graphical user interface system to more of an HTML5 interface system, which is a lot more cross-platform compliant. It allows them to integrate with web-based programming through the cloud, and that's what they've been aiming at. Now, with the acquisition of Lightroom many years ago, the two platforms, Lightroom, Photoshop, were different platforms, and they've been slowly integrating the two of them together. And Lightroom finally became basically Adobe's Camera Raw processor as a standalone system. But the interface remained completely separate. They finally decided that, hey, we're going to make the two of them a little bit more similar. Now, I mentioned this last week. In my opinion, they should have gone all the way and made them both completely the same looking, but they didn't. Why? I don't know. There's probably something within the operating system that prevents them from doing so, but we'll see what happens down the road. All right. So what I want to do is just go over the Adobe Camera Raw filter. Now, when you first open up an image, if you go from Lightroom into Photoshop like I normally do, it circumvents the Adobe Camera Raw interface simply because Lightroom acts as your Adobe Camera Raw interface. So it basically takes that information and loads it into Photoshop. Where you're going to see the Adobe Camera Raw is if you open up a file straight from your hard drive, meaning you're not coming in from Lightroom. All right. The other way you can do it is if you have something already open, you can always go back into Adobe Camera Raw just by going to the top menu, filter. Where am I? Filter, Camera Raw filter. Okay. So let me open that up. And the first thing you're going to notice is that the interface looks completely new compared to the older interface that they had. Previously, they had a bunch of icons across the top. You clicked on them and it opened up some functions on the right-hand side. Now everything is pushed over to the right-hand side. It looks very similar in style to Lightroom, but like I said, in my opinion, they could have gone all the way. However, if you look at this interface with something like Lightroom Mobile, you're probably going to see a lot more similarity in that respect. And again, keep in mind that Adobe's looking to go in the direction of being fully mobile somewhere down the road. Okay, so a lot of the interface needs to be able to work off the cloud. All right, or at least you know, with the smaller processing engines that, you know, tablets and cell phones have. All right, so the first thing you're going to notice is that the interface looks very similar, with a couple of differences. You know, we have geometry instead of what was it? Transform. All right, we have optics, which is lens. Actually, let me pull up Lightroom. All right, instead of lens correction and transform, we have optics and geometry, but everything else pretty much stays the same. Now, in Lightroom, we also have these little icons that you see all the way over on the right-hand side. These icons are typically placed underneath the histogram. Here, they're in a separate bar, running up and down all the way to the right. All right. Also, if you have a keen eye, you may notice that there is no crop tool. All right. Because this was already opened in Photoshop, when I go back into Adobe Camera Raw, for some reason, it removes the crop tool. You're not able to do crop in Adobe Camera Raw once it's entered into Photoshop, simply because you have a crop tool in Photoshop itself. So I guess they felt it's a little bit redundant. But you will see the crop tool when you first open up a raw image. Okay. Now, the other thing you're going to notice is that all the sliders now look pretty much the same as what you would find in Lightroom. And we have the same, you know, interface, the new interface for our curves adjustment. All right, and previously the curves adjustment tool, both in Lightroom and Photoshop, were a little vague. I mean, you have to be very familiar with it. At least now they're starting to get it so that they're a little bit more intuitive. All right, we have our parametric curve. Parametric curve simply means that when you hover over a section, whether it's your darks, your shadows, your midtones, your lights and your brights, or actually in this case it's just highlights, lights, darks, and shadows, it's going to highlight a very specific area. And this highlighted area represents the extent of how you can manipulate that part of the curve. In other words, here I am in my darks. I can only move that curve to the extent of that highlighted area. I cannot, for example, max it out to the very, very top. All right. So this allows you to maintain your curve enhancements within the limitations of the raw data. You can't, in other words, you really can't exceed the data that's already there. So that kind of helps a little bit. However, if you want, there is a point curve, all right, and that's the second icon over. And this acts like a normal curve that you would find in Photoshop, where you place a point and you can move that point anywhere, including being able to max it out. Why you would do that is beyond me, but you know, there are, and you can add secondary points, even a third point, a fourth point, all right, as many points as you feel you need on this line to get your image looking the way you want. Okay, so you still have that ability. Now previously you can also do point curves by channel. All right, so you have your RGB channels, your red, green, and blue channels. And previously it was a little drop down that you clicked on, a drop down, and you picked red, green, or blue. They've gotten rid of the drop down and they've given us little circle icons where we have red, green, and blue. Actually, let me see if I have my... Let's see, hold on 1 second. Oops. Hold on. I hit the wrong button. I know what I'm doing. Here we go. All right. Give me 1 second. Let me pull up my... That way I can highlight here. There we go. Okay, so right above the curve adjustment, you're going to see a red, a green, and a blue circle. This allows you to, with one click, switch over to your various channels. And one of the things that I teach when I teach anything in regards to color manipulation in Photoshop or Lightroom, whether it's be manipulating through a curve adjustment or a levels adjustment or any other type of adjustment, is that you have to keep in mind what the channels represent. RGB represents for red, green, and blue, but they have their opposites, which sits in the realm of what we call direct print or printing, which is CMY, all right, which stands for cyan, yellow, and magenta. And one of the ways to remember it is that RGB and CMY are the opposites. So R and C are opposites of each other. So if you can remember RGB, CMY, you can keep in mind which one is opposite. Now, you don't really have to do that mental juggling anymore. It's represented in as a color overlay right here on the actual graph. So if you notice up in the upper left-hand corner, we're seeing red, and then in the lower right-hand corner, we're seeing the cyan color. All right, so a very quick look tells you that if I go up, I'm going to be adding red. If I go down, I'll be adding cyan. All right, so this now takes all the guesswork out of it. All right, and it allows you to manipulate individual color channels should you need to. Okay, and of course it's the same whether you're in the yellow channel. Here we have yellow in the upper right, and green in the upper right, magenta in the lower left, and in the blue channel has blue in the upper left. I can get my directions right. That's what I get for looking backwards on my screen here. We got blue in the upper left corner, and it's opposite yellow. All right, so if you want to cool off an image, you go up into the blue. If you want to warm it up, you go down into the yellow. All right, that's probably the most common use. All right, and then of course the white one brings you to all channels. All right, so that one copies over from Lightroom, and it's a neat little feature. The other thing that copies over from Lightroom are in the local adjustment tools. Okay, so what do I mean by local? In comparison to what would be considered a global adjustments. So in the basic tab, when I manipulate the exposure tab or the highlights tab or the shadows tab, I'm affecting the entire image. This is what's considered a global adjustment. All right, global means it affects the entire image. A local adjustment only adjusts to a very specific part of the image that you decide what you want. So for example, we have our adjustment brush, where we can actually brush a very specific area of an image. We have our graduated filter, which allows us to do a gradient from 100% to 0. And of course, we also have a circular gradient, which works similar from 100 to 0, but in a circular manner. All right. So we can apply very specific effects. So for example, let's say I wanted to put a little bit of emphasis down on the bottom of the church where the doors are. Okay. Get my radial filter, and I'll say I want to open up my shadows. Okay. And maybe open up my blacks. All right, I'm going to move these sliders a lot, so hopefully you'll be able to see the process. Obviously, it's not, I wouldn't edit like this, but I just want you to see how it's affecting it. So it's keeping that extreme adjustment to a very local area. Previously, you couldn't do very much with modifying the color. All you could do was modify the exposure, whether it's the midtones or the lights and darks. All right, you could manipulate color through color temperature and color tint, but those are pretty much just reserved for making corrections to either the color temperature or any influence based on either your lens or the lighting that you're using. It wasn't really designed for any kind of major color changing. So what they've done is in both Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw is they have added a hue slider that allows you to change the color of whatever the local adjustment brush is on. So you can see I've changed the color of that bush at the front. Let me see if I can zoom in here. It won't let me zoom in very good. It's changed the bushes from green to this kind of like red color. All right, so you can really change what the color is. However, if you notice on the church, it really didn't do much simply because the church is in gray tone. There's no color variables in there to begin with to manipulate. It's all gray tones. So you're going to have a hard time changing grays to a specific color. There are ways of doing it, but this is not one of the ways. All right. There has to be some kind of color information there to begin with in order for you to manipulate it. So in this case, we went from green and we changed it to red. Okay. So why is this needed if you can do these kind of changes in Photoshop in other ways. One of the reasons is probably if the change that needs to be made is a small one, where it doesn't warrant you having to replicate the layer, modifying just that one small spot of the layer, and now you have additional, you basically have a layer that's just doing the work of that one tiny little spot that can very easily have been done elsewhere. All right, so being able to do it in small changes like that in Adobe Camera Raw really helps save processing excuse me helps save processing power and file size in the long run. Okay. So that's one of the reasons for including it. It's included in Lightroom simply because Lightroom does not have the power that Photoshop does, and there was enough of a request for that tool to be implemented into Lightroom. And because Lightroom is Adobe Camera Raw, it just carries over. All right, so use it as you see fit. It does have its uses, so it's there. All right. Let's see. So the other thing that is kind of nice is in Lightroom you have the use of presets. You can create presets, you can download presets, you can share presets with friends that allows you one-click functionality to a lot of editing processes. One of the things that they introduced is what's called ISO adaptive presets. And this is helpful in things like noise reduction and grain. Noise reduction is a function of your ISO. When you increase your ISO, you are increasing signal to noise ratio. And we need, filters to be able to correct for that noise gain, which renders a lot of the images with that noisy grain. All right. We need to be able to reduce that to a more smoother look, I guess you can best describe it. The problem was, if you created a preset for, let's say, noise reduction, that preset did not care what the ISO was of your image. All right. So if you needed a preset to reduce the noise on, let's say, an image that was shot at ISO 800, you really can't use that same preset on an image that was shot at 1600, simply because that preset wasn't designed for that intense grain of a 1600 ISO image. So you needed to create a separate preset to handle that noise reduction. What Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw have added now is the ability to say, you know what? We're going to allow you to build one preset, and we're going to do all the work of adjusting it according to what your ISO is. So in order for this to work, you need to have two images, one at your base ISO and one at your high ISO. Build the preset accordingly. Okay. So for example, ISO 100, you may not do any noise reduction, but you might do a little bit of sharpening. With a high ISO, you might want to do a lot more sharpening and counter that with a little bit less sharpening. So now you have the two extremes. You then tell Lightroom and Photoshop, I want you to build a preset based on these two, and then when I apply it, if my ISO is anywhere in the middle, go ahead and adjust from those two extremes to fit that ISO. So it really helps, being able to build presets that are a lot more functional across a wide variety of images. All right. If you're an event photographer, you're always changing your ISO. As soon as you go outside, your ISO drops. As soon as you go inside, your ISO goes up. When the sun starts going down, your ISO starts going up. So in one event, you may have a bunch of images with different ISOs. Now you can have one preset that accommodates all those varying ISOs and adjusts accordingly. So that in my opinion is awesome. And unfortunately, I now have to go back through all my presets and redo them in order to take advantage of this ISO variant function. Okay. All right. Any questions so far? Are we good? Yeah. Okay. All right. So ISO adaptive. We
Can I
handle.
ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So, if I got this right, so you take one photo, let's say is at 100 ISO,
Mm-hmm.
and you take a second photo, let's say it's at, I don't know, 1250 or something.
Right. Yeah. 1600. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so you work on them first?
Yeah. So the way presets work, and me personally, I like building presets in Lightroom because they're easier to manage in Lightroom than they are in Photoshop. Photoshop's still a little clunky. You can still do it, but so the way it works is, let's say I want to build a preset that handles noise. All right. So for my 100 ISO image, I'm going to work on the noise reduction, which is probably minimal. Like I said, I may do a little bit of sharpening, just a tiny bit, and probably no noise. Okay, I don't need to touch the luminance of the noise or anything. However, what I'm going to do is now think about my shooting habits. All right, for me, I tend to mainly never. I shouldn't say never. More often than not, I do not shoot above 800 ISO. All right. I do occasional go above it, but not too often. So the majority of my work is in the 800 range. So I'm going to pull up an image that's shot at ISO 800, and I'm going to do the same noise reduction manipulation that I would for an 800 ISO image. All right, get that looking good. That means I'm going to be a little bit more aggressive with my noise reduction. All right, and because that noise reduction softens it up a little bit, I might do additional sharpening. Okay, which is different than how I handle my 100 ISO image. Okay, now I select the two. I go to create my new preset, which is now going to be an ISO, what's the term? ISO adaptive. All right, I'll call it like ISO adaptive noise reduction. Just for the sake of it. All right. Both Lightroom and Photoshop, because it's ISO adaptive, require a minimum of 2 images. All right. So you want those 2 images to be at the extremes, because Lightroom and Photoshop are going to do the math in the middle. Okay. Now, if you wanted to, you could do one at 100, one at 400, and one at 800. Grab all 3, put it through the preset generator, and generate a preset based on those 3. Still going to do the same thing, but it's now going to use that middle as a math point. All right. So basically, Lightroom is now going to do all the math in between according to your settings.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
But the key is you want to analyze your shooting habit and say, okay, I want this to work with what I normally shoot on my high end to obviously to your base level. Okay.
And it doesn't overdo it.
And it doesn't overdo it. Okay. Now, if you never, ever, ever touch noise reduction in your base, then you might want to say, you know what? My base for the preset, I'm going to start it off at 400. I don't need to go to the 100. Again, you gotta weigh it to how you work. All right. There are photographers that constantly shoot events anywhere between 400 and 1600. So that's going to be their range. All right. Bird photographers will sometimes up their ISO in order to make sure that they have their shutter speed. All right. So Alan's going to build a preset that works in favor for his shooting style. Okay. And then both Lightroom and Photoshop will do the math in between. So that it's such a fantastic feature that, whoever came up with it should be given a medal, in my opinion. So, but anyhow. So one of these, I still have to convert some of my presets over to the ISO adaptive one. So maybe in a future episode, I'll actually cover how to physically do it on the machine. So, all right. Okay. So the other thing, Adobe Camera Raw now carries over all your Lightroom presets. Okay. So all the way on the right-hand side, right along that vertical bar, all right, the pretty much second to last icon is these two circles overlapping each other. That's your presets, all right. And if I flip over to Lightroom, over on the left-hand side, these are my presets from Lightroom, all right. The first few are the ones that come pre-built into Lightroom, okay? And then these here, the one that says color tone, exposure, noise, vignette, and user presets, these are my presets, all right? So now when we go back over to Photoshop, you're going to see, here it is, these are carried over, all right? Color tone, exposure, noise, vignette. So now I have access to all my presets and on both sides, all right, which is awesome. Okay. The other thing, let's get my notes. Okay. As I mentioned, optics and geometry have been renamed here. I don't know why it's different than Lightroom. Maybe we'll see this change occur in Lightroom down the road. I will not be surprised if, in a couple months I open up Lightroom and instead of transfer I see geometry there as well. Okay.
I think that's what they've been calling them in Lightroom Mobile already.
Yeah. See, I'm not. I hate Lightroom Mobile. I'm not ready to make the switch over yet. So I avoid it like the plague, but yeah, I won't be surprised. Yeah. So like I said earlier, they're just looking to homogenize their entire product line across all three products to be able to work mobily. Okay. All right. A thing that they added in Adobe Camera Raw is you can now merge to HDR and you can merge to Pano. I don't have multiple images set up here, so I can't quite show you. And to tell you honestly, I wouldn't know where to begin. When you have multiple images selected, you're going to see a film strip, kind of like you would with Photoshop, which I don't have here, and I apologize for that. But anyhow, you now have the ability to grab multiple images and combine them into HDR, or combine them into a panorama right here in Adobe Camera Raw. You don't have to go through the HDR or the panel engine in Photoshop. You can do it before you even get into Photoshop. Okay. And the other thing I can't show you right now, in the crop mode, they added the center overlay for, actually I could probably show you in here. Oops, wrong one. All right, see how this has the rule of thirds overlay? You can change that overlay here. Oh, wait a minute. You can change that overlay. And this is how often I use it. Where am I? Okay, overlay. Letter O changes the overlay. This is the new one where it's got a line down the center horizontally and vertically. All right, so minor. They just added this one, but you can toggle through all the different overlays. It's the same in Photoshop as it is in Lightroom.
Doc,
Yes.
in Adobe Camera Raw, now the tools aren't up on top like the
They're what?
Okay, I'm not making sense. The tools that used to be up on top.
Oh,
for
correct.
Yes. Will I find crop on the right-hand side the same I would find it in Lightroom?
Yeah. So
Okay.
So you would see crop right in between this first and second one here.
Okay.
All right. That's where crop would be. All right. But you only get crop when you first bring a raw image in.
Okay.
All right. I've already opened this image in Photoshop, and then I went back into Adobe Camera Raw, and for some reason it just gets rid of the crop feature. I guess they figure crop's already built into Photoshop. You know, I've already did my crop and straightening when I came in. Now that I go back, for some reason I don't have access to that. I don't know if it was done on purpose or if it's an oversight, if it's, you know, going to be changed further down the road. Who knows?
Well, it would make sense anyways, because if I either crop it in Adobe Camera Raw, or I wait till I do my stuff and then go into Photoshop and then crop it there.
Yeah.
Even though I go back and do things in Camera Raw, cropping is not one of the things I go back to in Camera Raw to do.
Yeah, normally. However, you know, if you look at the comparison with Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw, Lightroom allows you to go back and edit your crop simply because Lightroom operates on a non-destructive level. And I think that's the reason why this one doesn't do it, because Photoshop does not work on a non-destructive level. It works on a destructive level. You consciously have to create a workflow to work non-destructively. All right? But for Photoshop's crop, you can tell Photoshop to just get rid of any extraneous pixels, so that once you set your crop, that's baked in. That's a destructive edit. All right. You do have the option of making that little check mark say, hey, no, I want you to preserve what's outside my crop border in case I want to change it later. All right. But again, this is, something that you have to consciously think about. Whereas in Lightroom, you don't. All right. So I think that's probably why they have it set up like this. Because once you make that destructive change in Photoshop, no amount of Adobe Camera Raw is going to bring that information back. So, but in my opinion, that's minor. That's minor. All right. All right. So we have the center crop overlay. And of course, just like Lightroom, they added a bunch of support for all kinds of new cameras and new lenses that have hit the market recently. And I believe the Canon R5 is in there. Okay. They've also made a lot of changes to how Adobe Camera Raw uses your GPU, which is your graphics processor. All right. In the past, it used to be very heavily dependent on your graphics processor. Now it's finding a balance between your computer's internal processing power and your graphical processor. All right. And those of you who are not familiar, what your graphics card does is it handles the workload of how it renders videos and images on your screen. So your graphics card, if it's a good graphics card, will have its own internal memory that handles a lot of this processing power, freeing up your computer to then process other things. All right. Lower end cards share the load. All right. So if you have a machine that seems like it's running slow, that may be one of the culprits. You may not have the processing power on the GPU end, and it's actually robbing your computer's processing power in order to render the images. All right. So that's one thing you can look at. Actually, let me go ahead and cancel out of here. If you go to your preferences menu and you click on where it says performance, there is a tab here, the performance. There's a section here called graphics processor settings. Okay. If you have a graphics card that has its own processor, you want to make sure that this is selected, this is checked. You want to use your graphics processor. Now here's the little caveat to that. Right below that is a button that says Advanced Settings. Go ahead and click on that. It's going to go and open up another dialog box. All right. And this one here where it says Drawing Mode, okay, you have three options: basic, normal, and advanced. If you have one of the newer high-end cards, go ahead and put it into advanced. All right, this allows your GPU to handle a lot of the processing power on its end. All right. If you have an older machine like mine's probably about 10 or 12 years old. All right. So it's having a bit of a harder time. I brought mine down to normal. Okay. It uses a good portion of your GPU processing, all right, but not as intensely as the advanced. And of course, if you still feel that your computer's running slow, you might want to do the basic, all right? And this is just going to give you bare bones GPU processing, but maybe you'll gain some performance on that. So those are three things. The other thing is you want to make sure that you have OpenCL or OpenGL checked, all right, you want to be able to use that part of the processing power, all right? All right, so that's that for that part. All right, and Photoshop also added a bunch of raw defaults. They added where you can bring in your camera raw defaults. I haven't played around with that feature, so I can't speak with any authority on it, but somewhere in there, there's the ability. Again, I tend to use Photoshop coming in from Lightroom, so I'm more familiar with how Lightroom handles my raw processing rather than how ACR handles my raw processing. But I just wanted to give you a little overview. All right. On the user side and the editing, we have some nifty little changes that have been added as well. Now, over the past several years, Adobe has been working with their AI system called Adobe Sensei. Basically, it's just kind of sort of like machine learning. They've been pumping in a bunch of different images, trying to teach Adobe Sensei how to look at and process images. All right, and where this is most noticeable is with their selection tool. Now, one of the biggest powerful features of Photoshop is being able to do all kinds of compositing from various sources. All right, and in order to do compositing, you need to be able to isolate your subject from its background in order to incorporate it into another image. All right. So in the past, we've been relegated to either the marching ants, where we go ahead and use our lasso tool, and we very carefully work to create our outline in order to make a selection. Or we can use the pen tool to do the same thing. When Adobe Sensei came out and says, hey, we're working on this algorithm to be able to, for Photoshop to analyze your image, determine what the subject is based on its learning, and then make the selection automatically for you. Now, up until very recently, it was sketchy at best. However, it was nice because it did the bulk of the work for you, and all you then had to do was just go in and fix whatever mistakes Photoshop couldn't quite do. So that makes it a lot easier than starting from scratch. All right? But Adobe's been working on trying to improve its selection. All right? And we have several tools available to us. All right? Now, one of the tools that you'll notice I have open here is my Properties tab. Okay? Actually, let me pause here for one brief second. I want to apologize because my screen will not look like yours. I have mine set up for the way I like to work, so I've moved panels around according to how I like to work. So you're going to notice that there's some slight differences between how yours look and how mine looks, all right? But if you're familiar with your layout, you shouldn't have a problem trying to, figure out what it is that I'm opening here. All right, now I opened up the Properties tab, and if you don't see the Properties tab on your bar, all you got to do is go up to, let me close this, Window, all right, and this allows you to control all your panels. And all the panels are listed here. So all you want to do is just go down to the properties and check it, and it will add it to your toolbar. Okay, so if you don't see something, just go to Windows, pop that open, and you're able to open up any of these. All right. Obviously, some of these you use, some of these you don't, so you can hide whatever you don't need. All right. Now, from here, it gives you a one-click access to resize your image. All right. You can crop, you can trim, or you can rotate your image. So with it, these are what they're calling quick actions. It's a single button press, and it brings you to that feature. All right. In my opinion, this here, clicking on the crop here, is the same as clicking on the crop icon here. It's whatever is easier for you. All right. Me personally, I just go straight to the crop icon and I'm there. Okay. But these are available. All right. However, once you have an image selected, or a layer selected, I should say, once you have an image layer selected, it changes. All right. And you now have two different buttons. The first one is remove background, and the second one is select subject. And these go directly to the Adobe AI, the Adobe Sensei, all right, in order to analyze your image and determine. Now, it's not perfect, okay? No computer has the same brain power that we do as humans, especially when we're looking at something and looking at it through the eyes of an artist. Okay, so we're gonna see these images that we create a lot differently than the computer does. The computer just sees math symbols. Okay, we see shapes and colors, lights and darks and things like that. Plus, we also rely on our experience of having been there on site and experienced that. So we have the emotional connection along with everything else. All right. So here's a quick demonstration. All right. If I click on the remove background, it's going to do its thing. So I just give it time. All right. And in this case, I had the American flag already set on the layer below, but you can see it missed the entire body of the bird. All it did was target the head. All right. Simply because if we look at the original, all right, if we look at the original, the brightest part of this entire image is the head. All right. The Adobe AI did not connect the fact that this brown section here was also part of the subject. All right, so you can see how this can fail. Okay. It works better on images that have a very clean background. So if you're a studio shooter working against a white background or maybe even a green screen, this will save you tons and tons of time by being able to cut out the background for you. And it does a very, very decent job in comparison to what was available even just last year. It's gone, leaps and bounds over what the older AI was doing. All right. So let me get rid of that mask. All right. The other one is select subject. All right. Now, this one, I don't know what the algorithm is, in the background. but I'm pretty sure it works fairly much the same way. But if you notice, in this case, what it did, it just created a selection. It didn't add the mask. All right. So this now allows me to go in and use additional tools. All right. So I can come up to my toolbar and click on, come on, click. My pen's acting up. Why is it not clicking? All right, well, anyhow, click on my brush tool and I can brush onto the subject and it auto fills that information in for me. All right, simply because in this particular case, there's enough definition between the brown and the green. All right, so how effective this tool works is very reliant on the quality of your image. Obviously, if you're working on images that have a soft edge, it's going to have a harder time. Okay, but now, because I did not automatically remove my background, all I asked it to do was just create a selection. I can now modify my selection, and once I'm happy with my selection, at that point I can go ahead and add my layer mask. Okay, and you can see that it does a much better job. Okay, because I've had some input into the actual selection. Okay, so those two are available right from the Properties tab. And to tell you honestly, even though those two are there, I don't really use that method. Okay, simply because, in my opinion, it's a bit clunky for my way of working. Okay, I'm just pointing it out because it's available. The way I like to work is with the object selection tool, okay, which is fairly new. It didn't come out this past month. It's actually been here for a while, but they've just, increased the functionality of it, made it a much better. But it's a fairly new addition. I think at least 6 months now, if memory serves me. But if I click on that, I have a couple of options. Over in the top, all right, along this menu bar, all right, there's a mode which is lasso or rectangle. So I have the option of creating a rectangular marquee, or I can have a freeform lasso tool. All right. So in this case, the lasso would probably serve me better than a marquee, because I can now, oh, sorry, I thought I had lasso checked. There we go. I can now take my mouse or my tablet, all right, and just draw around my subject. So I am basically telling Photoshop, this is my subject. All right, this is the outer border of my subject. Go ahead and find the edge for this subject and work your magic. All right, and you can see in this particular case, it does a really, really great job. Okay, and then from here, I can now again go down and make a mask. Okay, now, as I am working on making my selection, all right, using the lasso can be a little tricky. All right, sometimes it's easier to be able to draw lines in between, especially if you're working with a mouse. Here in this case, I'm talking into the camera, not paying attention. You can see I'm going like all over the place. But if I press the Alt key, it now changes to a line, all right, where I can make lines instead of my selection. Okay, so this allows you to use the lasso tool for like intricate places, but when you need to cover ground, you can turn it by pressing the Alt key, turn it into a polygonal tool and able to just draw polygons. Now, obviously, I didn't select my entire subject. I got it going here. If I were to start again, all right, it's going to erase everything that I just did. Like any other selection tool, you have to watch what you have selected in the upper left corner. All right, the first icon is, a single selection. The second icon is you want to add to the selection. And then the third icon is you're going to subtract from the selection. All right, and I don't even use the last one, so I don't even know what that is. But you can also use the shortcut keys of the Shift to add or Alt key to subtract from your selection. All right. Like, for example, if I wanted to subtract this brown area from the white, I just hit the subtract key. All right. And if I want to add to the white area, I just hit the Shift key and it adds it. All right. So if at any point it looks like it failed, all I got to do is hit the Shift key to add and the Alt key to subtract. All right. And you can modify your selection that way. All right. So in this case, let's go and add the rest of this head. Okay. And you can see I've missed a spot. All I got to do is Shift key to add. I circle that, let go. All right. Oh, took a little bit too much. Hit the Alt key. And it's fixed. Okay. It missed the beak. Hit the Shift key. It adds the beak. Missed a few spaces. Go back and refine. All right. So in this particular case, the first time I did a really, really good job. But in the event that you have a more complicated selection, you can fine tune it by adding to and subtracting from your selection using the Shift and Alt keys. And for you Mac people, it's Shift and Command, I believe. Shift Command or Shift Control or something like that. All right, you'll figure it out, Mac people. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. The other way is you can just go ahead and click on the rectangle tool and draw a rectangle around your subject that you want to isolate, and it will calculate it for you. All right. So sometimes the marquee is the best choice, especially if you're looking for small isolated subject matters. And then sometimes the lasso is your better choice. Okay. Now, once you create your mask, again, you can always double click on your mask, which will pop up the mask tool that allows you to refine your mask. Okay. In this case, you can, add smoothing. You could add feathering. You can add edge contrast and things like that. And behind the scenes, Adobe has made some changes to this. You're not going to see it because it's not a user interface. It's actually within the code. They made it a little bit more, what's the word? Responsive. Okay. All right. So let me clear that. Hit OK. All right. Any questions so far with the selection tool? Okay. All right. So again, and right at the very top where you have your marquee and lasso, you have your object selection tool. Okay. And you have several available to you. Okay. And for some reason, my mouse is acting up. There it is. All right, so you have your object selection, which I just showed you. You have your quick selection. All right, so that's been around for a while. That just basically lets you draw on your subject and say, hey, this is what I want to select. All right, but as you can see, sometimes it runs into issues. Okay, so these tools are still available. They just expanded on it a little bit. All right. Okay. If you do any kind of graphic design work, Adobe has added functionality to their font recognition. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because this is basically for us photographers, not for us graphic designers. All right, Brian, you might want to look into it. If you run across a font in an image or a piece of artwork that you want to identify, all you got to do is marquee it, and Adobe Font Finder will do a fairly decent job at identifying the font for you. It's pretty cool. Okay. All right, and let me just double check. All right, the other thing I want to discuss is the content aware fill. Content aware fill. This is another aspect of the Adobe Sensei that has received a lot of work over the past several years. If you've ever had to clone something out, all right, you understand that small blemishes on somebody's skin when you're doing portrait retouching is fairly easy. But when you're trying to do more aggressive removals, such as you do an event photo and you got the bride and groom looking all beautiful and the bridesmaid and the best man, and you fail to realize that in the background is a nasty, dirty dumpster. Now all of a sudden you need to remove that dumpster. Well, in the past, you needed to make sure that you had enough source material in order to effectively be able to remove it. Now we have the ability of machine learning to say, hey, I will pick out the best parts of the image for you to remove that nasty dumpster. Okay? Now, I don't have a nasty dumpster, but I have this young boy here that I photographed fishing off a dock. And directly behind his head are two boats. Now, I would like to see those boats gone. Okay. So I'm going to show you one, an easy removal, and then two, I'm going to show you a more effective removal for something as complex as when there's a subject in front of it. All right. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to look at these two boats that are in by themselves. All right. This is probably the easiest type of removal. All right, and for this, you just need to make a general selection. All right, my favorite tool is the lasso tool. All right, this allows me to kind of create a loose selection around what I want to remove. All right, now if you notice, I'm not being careful. I've actually left areas around the boats on purpose. All right. And you need to do this because those edges is what Photoshop is going to be using to analyze what to fill the content in with. All right. So once I have my selection, I go to Edit, Content Aware Fill. So Edit, Content Aware Fill. All right. Once you click on that, it's going to open up a dialog box. All right. And this is fairly new. All right. If you've been using Photoshop for the past several months, you'll have noticed this change. And what you're looking at is basically the panel on the left-hand side is the before, and the panel on the right-hand side is the after. However, the green tint is what Photoshop has determined is suitable to pull as a resource for filling in where those boats are. Okay? So as you can see, it does a fairly decent job. However, it actually selected this boat here, so I don't want that boat influencing the Adobe AI. It also selected the tops of these pylons. I don't want that texture influencing the Adobe AI. So I can just select the brush and erase parts of that selection, the automatic selection, that I think are not beneficial for using as a cover-up. Now, on the right-hand side, I can see a preview of how well it does it. Now, again, it does a fairly decent job. It's just not going to be perfect. Okay, again, it's not perfect. All right, so you can see where the boats were. It's actually placed a couple of really tiny buoys. And if you're wondering where those buoys are being pulled from, it's this one right here. All right, which is right at the edge of that green. Okay, for some reason it says, hey, we need buoys there. All right, so now I want to go ahead and just delete that. It's going to refresh, and there's my buoys are gone. Okay, or I could simply just accept it and use the patch tool in Photoshop, to get rid of it. Okay, now the one thing that you have to realize is that certain even textures that are fairly consistent, like this water texture, it tends to soften it up a little bit. All right. So you may need to go back in with maybe a stamp tool in order to fix that softness. Okay. So again, it's not 100%, but it does a really, really decent job of getting rid of unwanted stuff. Okay.
Doc,
Yes.
I'd like to ask about this. I have on my desktop both Photoshop CS5 and CC.
Mm-hmm.
I use Content Aware a lot.
Yep.
I have found that the Content Aware in my CS5 works substantially better than the CC. When I use Content Aware in CC, I get kind of like a hint. It's like it only gets rid of 80% of the image. Do you have any feeling for what to do to change the CC so that it gets rid of everything?
Okay. The first thing you have to understand is that they're using two totally different pieces of technology. All right. The Content Aware in the older version was more like a jacked up patch tool. All right. So what ends up happening is that what it's doing is it's taking a section somewhere else moving it in and then blurring the edges in order to kind of mask where what's being covered up. What I found with the old one is I then had a very blurry outline of what was patched, okay, with the old content aware, okay. The new AI is using a slightly different method where it's sampling different areas to construct a new section, all right. It's using data, but instead of doing kind of like this copy, move, paste, and blur the edges, it's taking little bits and pieces and putting them in place, okay? That's why you saw there were two buoys when it covered it up, because it used this little section here in two spots. So it's not taking a big chunk and moving it like the old content aware. It's taking bits and pieces and then reassembling it. Okay. So for that reason, you're probably going to see a big difference in the way it handles the fill. All right. And because it's still using this kind of blend technique, that's why we get that softening. All right. So yeah, there are pros to one and there are pros to the other. It's a matter of which one you like better. Okay. Obviously, Photoshop is moving away from the handwork more to the automated work, where you then go back and clean it up a little bit. Yeah, it's 6 of one, half dozen the other. You know, if you still like the other way, you know, you can kind of sort of do that with the patch tool.
Well, the whole thing is that with the CC, I get part of the background that I'm trying to get rid of showing through once I use the content aware. Whereas with the CS5, what I want to be gone is actually gone, and that's what I want.
Okay. Some of that may be. I think I understand what you're talking about. Part of I think I know exactly what you're talking about, because I have experienced this. What I have noticed is that if you are making, go ahead and mute your microphone if you could, please. If you are making large, if you're trying to cover up a large section, all right, it's going to have a harder time, all right, because in order to fill something in, Photoshop needs to know what it's using as information to fill in. The more information Photoshop has to cull from, the better that fill's going to be. If you have a selection, let me just get out of this for a second. All right, let's say I wanted to get rid of this island. Okay. I'm going to make my selection around the island, and I'll just do that boat as well. Okay. I'm going to go image, edit, content aware fill. All right. And of course, Photoshop is going to say, okay, based on that selection, what can I pull from? All right. And you can see everything that is green here is information that Photoshop is now going to use to try to cover that up. And if you notice, all right, it did a very lousy job of covering it up, right? So this is very similar to what you would get in your experience, right? Where the background isn't quite matching up. Okay. Again, you have to understand we're dealing with a machine that deals with numbers. Okay. All this blue area is just a series of numbers. All this sky area is just a series of numbers. All right. And it's trying to make its best determination of which numbers best represent what in your image. Okay. This is where we need to step in and say, okay, first of all, I don't want that boat being used as a sample point. Okay. Wow. Actually, look at that. As soon as I got rid of that boat, it fixed it incredibly well. All right. But I'm just going to take it further. All right. I'm going to say, I don't want it sampling these boats. All right. Because I don't want, oh, and now we're back. Go figure. All right. I don't want these boats influenced because I don't want any boats in that area that's being patched. I just want open water. All right. So I just want water. I want to make sure I select only water to sample from. Okay. All right. Boy, talk about clunky, huh? All right. Okay. So now, again, this is not the end point. All right. It's not a magic tool that you do it once and you forget about it. All right. And call it quits. Okay. These tools are designed to make your workflow easier, faster. All right. So now I've gotten the image to a point where it makes my editing, taking it from here further, a lot easier. I got rid of that big part of the island. All right. Once I'm okay with that, I hit apply, bakes it in. Okay, give it a second. All right, hit OK. And you can see that it does a very decent job. However, because I am not a machine and I can determine the different types of textures, I can see that the texture here is way off. So at this point, I know I have to do a little bit of cleanup there. I also see right here, there's a little bit of discrepancy in my texture. I need to do a little bit of cleanup here. All right, but these two areas of cleanup are a lot smaller than that big chunk of island that was there previously. Okay, does that make sense? All right, so now, again, let me pick these boats. Edit, content aware. All right. So by default, Photoshop's going to make a selection based on its predictive capabilities. All right. But you can override this. Okay. Up here, we have auto rectangular, which is basically just a rectangular marquee. And then you have custom. All right. This is the one that I like. Okay. So by using, by using custom, it's saying that the sampling brush is going to be used to add sections of the image that I want Photoshop to consider as a replacement for those regions. Okay. So in this case, let me bring this over here. Actually, hold on. Let me bring this back to where it was before. There we go. Okay. We'll do this, since this is our problem area. All right. So I want that area gone. If I feel the AI isn't doing it, I'm going to do custom. Okay. And then, because I know that this section here, the lower part of this little island, lines up with our horizon line. Okay. All right, because now we're looking at it with human eyes, not machine eyes. I know that the texture here on the water is different than the texture here. So I don't want any of this texture, the foreground texture, I don't want any of this applied back here because it's going to look funny. All right, this is near, this is far. I don't want near where the far is. Okay, so I'm going to make my selection. Okay, I got my brush. I'm going to tell it I want it to pick up areas from here, maybe even from here and from here. Okay. All right. Now, if you notice, it's a big old mess. Simply because I have not given Photoshop enough information. All I did was select the horizon. All right. I'm going to click a little bit of the water around here. All right. And I'm going to now select the sky area. All right. Because the majority of this island sits above my horizon. All right. Give it a few seconds. Okay, now we're starting to get somewhere. Okay, oh, there we go. We need more sky. We need a little more water. Okay, so now I'm able to say, okay, there we go. All right, now we're getting somewhere. All right, and I'm avoiding the boats. Okay, there we go. Okay, but I'm still seeing a kind of like a repeat pattern going on here. All right, simply because the water area is so polluted with other elements that I don't want. It's got boats. It's got buoys, okay? Oops, we got land masses over here that I want to avoid, all right? So all of everything that I'm painting green, I'm telling Photoshop to go ahead and use as your source, all right? So it would be as if I'm using the stamp tool, the clone tool, or the patch tool, but in small pieces rather than one big chunk. Except I'm not doing manually, I'm letting Photoshop do it. Okay, now it's gotten me pretty close. At this point, I would say, good, I'm happy with this result. Is this the end? Absolutely not. It should never be the end, because I can see discrepancies here. All right, I can see a little bit of softness in some of the texture. I can see some repetition that needs to be corrected. However, with just a few brush strokes, I did the majority of the work. Okay, All right, so we can say apply and hit OK. And at this point, I will then go ahead and click on my clone stamp and say, all right, sample from here, sample from here. All right, oh, let's change that to 50%. Okay. Get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of that. Okay. And now I just work on getting rid of all the pattern repetition. Okay. And then once I'm happy with the results, okay, once I'm happy with the results, then I can go ahead and call it done. All right. Does that make sense? Judy, does that make sense to you?
Yes. Although I have to admit that I'd probably be a lot less fussy about the texture of the ocean.
Well, yeah, you know what? Again, it goes down to what is the end result of the image, okay? I'm a little bit more picky simply because my clients tend to be picky.
Is there a place where I can find the things written so that I don't have to remember how to select all the things that I want to leave out?
A written step, yeah. Actually, if you go to the Adobe help.adobe.com, I believe is the link. The Adobe Help site has tutorials on pretty much everything.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yep. And of course, there are a ton of YouTube videos that walk you through very specific parts.
Yeah, but sometimes those YouTubes go on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know. Like mine. You know, mine just goes on and on. Okay. But I think part of the problem is just mindset. You know, you can't look at these tools as the end all because just like your camera, you're not going to put it in full auto mode and expect it to get it 100% right 100% of the time. It's just, machines don't work that way, okay? You need to have the input into that machine to override it when it needs to. It's the same thing with these editing tools. All right, a lot of these tools are designed to get you very, very close, doing a lot of the grunt work, and then all you got to do is go in and fix whatever minor flaws there are. Okay. Also, you got to understand that Photoshop, there's 1,000,001 ways to do the same exact task. Okay, you can here you can use the content aware fill. You can use the stamp tool. You can use the patch tool. You can use the clone tool. I can do overlays and manually blend them. I can create texture maps of the water and use texture maps to do a blend. Okay. They're longer methods, all right, but they all do the same exact thing. It's all a matter of how comfortable you are with a certain tool and what your end needs are, okay? For a lot of us, we need to save time and effort. So if we can, hand over a lot of the bull work to the machine, all the better, okay? All right, so that's the auto select, the rectangular select, and the custom select within the content aware fill. All right, now the best obviously is the manual mode, but I find that the auto mode gets me 90% of the way there. I can then take the brush tool and modify what Photoshop deems is suitable. All right, and I can modify it accordingly. I can add to that selection and I can subtract from that selection. Okay. All right, very quickly, the few other things are kind of minor. In the lens blur, so if you do anything with lens blur, like if you want to replicate a tilt shift lens, or if you want to do a gradient blur, Photoshop has done a lot of behind the scenes work in making it work a lot more effectively with your graphics processor, giving a more realistic look to the blur, working towards creating a realistic bokeh, especially when it comes to highlight colors in the blurred areas. All right. If you're not familiar with what I mean by bokeh, this may be a little bit above you. But if you know what I mean by bokeh and that soft, dreamy backgrounds, okay, where points of light just kind of radiate, they've worked on making that a lot more realistic. Okay, and we've covered the use of the graphical processor. I showed you where to check it. Oh, the other thing. All right.
Hey, Duck, while you're on the topic of graphical processor, how do I know if I can use advanced or if I have to use basic?
Performance. If you notice a decrease in speed and performance, you might want to, as my system's getting older, I'm starting to notice that as Photoshop keeps getting bigger and better, my machine's starting to show its age. All right, so by allowing the processor to handle certain things, it's able to work faster. But my GPU now, like I said, it's about 12 years old. All right, it's not able to handle it as well. So I'm starting to notice a little bit of lag in certain things. So what I would suggest is open up an image and just run through some paces. All right, and kind of make a mental note. Where is your system hanging up? Is it in multiple layers? Is it in the rendering? Whenever you add a new effect, is it rendering slower? Okay, just kind of make a mental note. Then go ahead and come to the preferences where it says drawing mode. Go from start off at advanced, go to normal. Do the exact same thing. See if there's any benefit to going to the advanced to the normal mode, and then go to the basic mode. The one thing I would suggest is every time you make a change, okay, although the software is not asking you to, I would go ahead and close it and reopen it just to start from baseline. Okay, so even though it's not requesting you to restart the program when you make a change here, I would just to rule that out. Okay, and then come back, go to the basic mode, see if you gain any speed in some of the work that you do. That's probably the best suggestion I can give you is just run a comparison, because every system's going to be different. Every processor is going to be different. Okay. All right. So okay. The other thing is in the where is it? Tools. If you go into tools, there's this animated zoom. All right. That uses your graphical processor to give you that fancy zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out. All right, you can disable that. Is it going to save you a lot? No, but if you're in a system that every little bit helps, that may help. Okay. All right. Let me check my notes one more time. I think I got everything. Any questions from anybody?
Okay, I did have a question. When you were talking about the graphic card,
Yeah.
my computer went down, so I totally missed what you said, and that was the part that I probably needed.
Oh.
My computer laptop isn't able to handle Photoshop.
Yeah, I'm. How old's? Oh no, yours is fairly new. You said yours is about 4 years old.
Yeah, 4 or 5 years.
4 or 5.
It's a laptop.
All right. Yeah.
I wondered about the graphic card though, and I know you started talking about that.
So you got a couple things working against you. One, it's an HP. All right.
Oh, thanks. I have an HP.
Okay.
If you do a little bit of research about HP, their business model is to give you affordable computers. All right. For that affordability, there's a trade-off. And the trade-off is they do not use current hardware. You're getting, second, sometimes even third generation hardware. All right. So even though your computer may be 4 years old, your graphics card may be 8 years old. Okay.
Okay, how do I find out about the graphics card?
You'd have to open it up, or
there's no way on the computer to.
Yeah, no, there's it's tricky. I think there's a way of checking software wise. Off the top of my head, I just don't know it.
Okay. That's something I'd have to look into.
But what you can do is if you go into your Windows control and you get the information about Windows, okay? It gives you a list of everything about your computer, what the processor chip is, how much RAM, how much ROM, how much internal, external memory, internal memory, your hard drive, the whole kit and caboodle. Okay. In that list, it will tell you what your graphics card is. That's in there. All right. Jot down the name, the serial number, and all that, and then do a Google search, and it will tell you the year of manufacture.
Okay.
All right. And that will kind of clue you in as to how old your card is.
Okay.
All right. You got to understand, budget computers use budget equipment, and that's usually, again, second generation, third generation hardware that, was top of the line 8 years ago, but now there's bigger and better things. So, all right.
Well,
now,
thank you very much.
What you can do is make sure that your graphics driver is up to date.
Okay.
All right. You also want to make sure that your Windows program is up to date. All right. And I personally ran into this problem with my laptop. My laptop is 10. No, my laptop's older than my desktop. My laptop's got to be about 14 years old now. Mm-hmm. All right. Now, when I bought it, it was top of the line gaming computer back then. All right. Now it's a clunky Model T. All right. But it's still pretty powerful. However, I did not update to the latest Windows. And when the latest update came for Photoshop and Lightroom, it told me my laptop was not compatible. And I panicked. The cringe factor was so tangible. All right. because I rely on my laptop. All right. So I went online and it says, okay, why is it not compatible all of a sudden? Okay, because it was yesterday. Now today it's telling me it's not. Okay, and it's because I had not installed the latest update to Windows, which the latest version of Photoshop needs. All right. Once I did that, I went back and it loaded beautifully. Loaded beautifully.
I'll have to try that.
Okay. Now, another thing. All right. So I'm going to pile on a bunch of stuff for you here. Okay.
Thank you.
Because all of these things may not be the singular item that's causing your problem, but it may be a combination of all of them stacked on top of each other.
Okay.
All right. Actually, I should probably go ahead and switch my screen. Okay. All right. So updating your graphics driver is 1. Updating to the latest version of Windows is 2. All right. When you're working in either Photoshop or Lightroom, you want to minimize any other usage. So you want to make sure you don't have other big heavy programs open at the same time.
Oh, okay.
Because they're all going to be competing for the same memory, all right, in order to operate. Okay, so if you have something open that you don't need, close it.
Okay.
All right. Now here's another issue that a lot of people don't consider. Okay. I'm going to switch back over to my desktop. That's my grandson. All right. Notice how very few icons I have. This is a very cluttered desktop for me. I normally don't have this kind of a mess. All right.
Okay.
This is messy. Now, why do I mention this? Because I have seen desktops where the entire desktop is covered in icons. Is this you?
Okay, so I'll have to clean up the icons.
Well, I'm asking you, is this you? Do you have a lot of icons?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Each one of those icons is a placeholder. Think of it as a placeholder.
Okay.
Saying, hey, computer, I want you to keep this program ready for use. I'm not using it right now, but just in case I need to use it, I want you to have a small portion of it in memory so that when I click on that icon, it loads up. That is robbing your system of resources. Every one of those icons that is linked to a program or to a file or a document or a video or an image is linked to something that is hogging memory. All right? So you want to get rid of this. All right? You want to keep it clean as possible. That's going to open up and give you a lot of your immediate random access memory. Okay?
Okay.
Doc?
Yeah.
I'm wondering if Bernie needs to defrag her hard drive, and maybe she doesn't have enough space on the hard drive for virtual memory.
I was actually going to get into that next. The other thing is, okay, programs require 2 pieces of hardware to operate. They need your direct RAM memory, okay, which is your computer's built-in memory core. All right, some have 8 gigs RAM, some have 4 gigs RAM, some have 16 gigs RAM, depending on the configuration of your machine. Okay, obviously the smaller amount, your machine's going to work a little bit harder. All right, because bigger programs, especially programs like Photoshop and Lightroom that are graphically bloated, all right, and require processing in order to handle these large files, require a lot of memory, read-write memory. Okay, So if there's not enough memory in your RAM memory, it's going to want to use, and actually does use, your hard drive memory. All right. So what it does is it allocates a section of clear disk space that says, this area, it's reserved for Photoshop. You can't use it. Get out. Nothing. You can't put files in here. All right. Photoshop needs this little chunk of memory. Okay. So now, as you're starting to save images and files and folders and documents, and you load this program and that program or that app, all right, it's taking up memory on your hard drive, and it's now squeezing that available space that Photoshop has allocated. Okay, so now it's competing with, maybe you have 4 megabytes of RAM instead of 8, so it can only handle whatever is left over from all those icons you have on your desktop. Okay, so that 4 gigabyte RAM may not be 4 gigabytes of actual usable space. All right, it may be using maybe 560 megabytes. All right, so now it's got to go to the hard drive for the rest of it. All right, but the hard drive's filling up, it's getting crowded. So now it's got to do a lot of this in order to work. The more it does this, the slower the machine goes. All right. So one thing you can do is clean up unneeded software that you don't use. Look through old files that you don't need anymore, get rid of them. If you have a secondary drive, maybe take some of that stuff, put it on your secondary drive, because you still want access to it, but you don't need it right now. What's that? All right. So that will free up your internal hard drive. Okay. And hopefully a combination of all these things will help alleviate some of your problems. All right. But as far as not loading.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. As far as not loading, it's probably you need to upgrade your Windows and or also your GPU driver. Okay.
I'm kind of losing you.
Yeah, you're breaking up. So yeah. All right. So if you have any issues,
I know I'm losing you.
Yeah. If you have any issues, email me. Okay.
I just have to do something. Yeah.
All right.
Let me open this. I need the internet connection. Thank you. Thank you. I was just trying to get more internet connection. The door was closed.
Oh, okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So if you have any issues, just email me. Okay. And I'll see if I can help you from my end. All right. I know that was a big chunk of information, but it will help with speeding up your system, and that applies to everybody. If any of you watching me right now look at your desktop and you see it filled with icons, clean that up. You're going to see a noticeable, and I mean a noticeable, performance change in your computer. Guaranteed. All right. Any last questions? Hopefully I didn't bore anybody.
Thank you very much. It was very informative.
This was good, Doug. Thank you very much.
This was very good, very good.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you, Doc.
No, thank you. This
Alrighty.
is really good.
All right, guys. Like I said, I am recording this. After this session ends, I'm going to process it, and it's going to be uploaded to my YouTube channel. So tomorrow you can always refer back to it if you need to at any point. Okay. Once again, I want to thank my Patreons for their support. Their support allows me to bring this content to you via Zoom. All right. So thank you to Carol, Bill, Jill, Bonnie, Brian, BJ, and Pam. Thank you so much, guys.
You're
All right.
welcome. You're welcome, and thank you.
And more better content to come. All right. I'm always looking to improve the channel. All right. So if you're not, go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel. That way, always be notified when I upload these sessions. Eventually, I want to get into producing other informative content. One aspect that I'm looking to do is how to get off of manual mode. Off of auto mode into manual mode on your camera. Okay. So I'm going to be putting some videos together for that. I want to do something with the studio. Okay. Let me change that back. All right. I want to do something with the studio. Doing some kind of workshops here in the studio that will go up on YouTube as well. I haven't quite figured out how to do that. I'd like to be able to get another camera set up so that I can do like a close-up view of what it is I'm doing in the background, rather than through just a simple webcam. So that's coming down the pipeline. But I just wanted to say thank you to my Patreons. All right, guys. Again, if you have any questions, you can reach me on Facebook. You can, ask me questions through Facebook Messenger. Or you can just send me a direct email. Or, when we're at a live event, just come up to me and say, hey, Doc, I'm having such and such an issue. Can you help me? I'll be more than happy to help. Okay? Don't forget, Wednesday is with Bill. He's going to be going over, event photography. And then on the 25th, it's the walkabout in Norwich with Robert and myself. Okay?
Thanks, Doug.
All righty, guys. Always a pleasure.
Okay, good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Everyone.
Bye.
All right.
Thank you for watching Learning Photography with Duck. Brought to you in association with Milford Photo, your local full-service camera store. Located in downtown Milford, Connecticut, Milford Photo offers you a personalized shopping experience. From the latest camera gear to printing and framing services. And, of course, educational workshops to teach you the finer aspects of photography. Don't forget to tell them Duck sent you.